Thank you for joining me for another moment of breaking news. In reviewing some of the cable news shows from this Friday, I stumbled upon an interesting thing that I think is worth sharing. Now, the following I can suggest to you is not fake news because I saw the actual footage that's being reported about in the show. They provided it, and you can see that it's clearly, overtly stated. Now, are the two people in the following story lying? I can't comment on that one way or the other in terms of knowing for sure, but I can say that the setting lends some credibility. This past Wednesday, apparently, in the middle of a Senate committee hearing, under oath, mind you, under oath and, penalty of perjury, the former assistant to the, I forget which department it was now, Victoria Rowland, or Don, I'm terrible. See, I should write these things down before I actually hit record. But I just got really excited because this is quite ridiculous. As early as 2016, let me give you the context. As early as 2016, reports were coming out in different media outlets that Russian ambassadors that have been in the States for, however long they'd already been in the States, not newcomers, not tourists, but known Russian ambassadors, all of whom were known, like commonly known in the, in the securities sector to have ties to Russian security services. They were being sort of found, apparently, claiming to be lost in strange, unusual places that happened to, once people analyzed where these locations were and what they had in common, all had links to underground digital transmission cable services of some kind or another, right? So, strange occurrences, Russian diplomats that you might as well acknowledge are spies are turning up and being found by different folks and being reported as being seen, wandering around, acting strangely, and just sort of generally being out in the middle of nowhere, in weird places. And it was suggested in the early reporting that it might have something to do with some sort of passive mapping of telecommunication services using some sort of technological scanning system, right? Who knows? But this past Wednesday, and here's the part that's trippy and interesting. This past Wednesday, in this hearing, the former assistant to a high-ranking official in the Obama's security of which of the offices was it? I don't think it was the DOJ. It might have been Homeland Security. I can run back and rewind the video a bit and confirm in a bit, but Victoria Noland, I think I got her name correctly. Forgive me if I have it incorrectly. She testifies under oath, under questioning from a legislator, that indeed these Russian ambassadors were suspected of attempting to do some kind of covert surveillance and mapping of infrastructure all over the United States, and that it was a known concern between the CIA and whatever her department was, I think it was DHS, and that they had many discussions about it, and were developing potential strategies as early as 2016. And why I wanted to bring it up and report on it is that the news has been a whirlwind clusterfuck the past few weeks, and I think most people are understandably caught up in the border family separation crisis. I think that moniker for it, that name for it, is too soft. I'm going with kidnapping chaos or something like that. Trying to go with a kidnapping alliteration. And it's good and right. I'm not complaining that we're focusing on that. I just think it's interesting how many other bizarre things are sort of flying under the radar in terms of general overall awareness. And quite honestly, Russia never leaves the thinking, one's thinking as one analyzes, I think, except for those who are patently choosing to ignore Russia as an issue because of whatever influences they've been convinced that it isn't a problem. But it's interesting that this is sort of cropping back up, and I think it represents a whole new wave of Russia-related disclosures, and that it might be ramping up into or in anticipation of President Trump's pending summit with President Putin himself. So, let's put a pin on this and watch this space, my friends. The debate rages on, I know. The Russiagate deniers are convinced that we should be friends with Putin and everything will be hunky-dory and Jesus will come down and hug us all for, ending the Cold War. And others are convinced that Russia and China have teamed up and are ready to, sort of spring a crazy take over our country trap through Trump somehow. And I don't know that any of those extreme theories are on point. I'm not even sure that I am clear about what I think my own theory is anymore. It certainly has been forced. I've been forced to adjust my theory multiple times, and I think it's about time that I sat down, really thought it out again, and re-express it, specifically around Donald Trump and what everything, this nexus of political melodrama really, really represents. But if I were a wagering man, if I was a betting man, which I am not, I do not wager on anything except penny slots, and that's just for the free drinks, folks. And I don't go to Vegas hardly ever, and I recently started trying to give up drinking just to do a purge, a cleanse rather. So, I guess you follow my drift. I'm not a betting man. I wouldn't wager on anything. But if I was forced to at gunpoint, I would put my money on Russia intervention and collusion being real, but more of sort of an ad hoc, confused, sort of impromptu thing that wasn't deep state driven and wasn't as much as the Kremlin and Putin might want to, in the future might want to make it sound as if it was some master plan all along. I think it was a weird influence of opportunity. Sure, and I mean within the realm of a few years. I don't mean as opposed to like a 20-year plan. The debate will rage on probably for months, if not years, until some really concrete evidence comes out. But I'm leaning towards the very frightening notion that we are indeed living through some version, some Russian version of the Manchurian Candidate, without the high-tech technology stuff. I think that it was just greed, money, and the organic brainwashing, of greed, politics, power, and corruption, as opposed to any kind of mind implants. Although there's been plenty of opportunity. That summit I was thinking when I was on my hiatus and watching news about the summit, that summit, it really weirdly arranged. One interpreter, no other known assistants, no other witnesses, no note takers, no other ambassadors or diplomats, just I think maybe 4 people total in the room? 5 people? And one of them on the North Korean side, the most notorious fixer, thug, black bag operative, sociopathic, crazy guy that you can imagine on the North Korean side, who also came to our country, although he was embargoed against and barred from entering the United States. So there's been a few opportunities where you could, in a science fiction version of this story, imagine that some sort of, high-tech implant has been implanted, or some sort of doppelganger replacement has been replaced. But it doesn't really make sense, and you don't need to go that far, because Donald Trump, A, hasn't changed his behavior radically, and B, has been like this his entire life. So it's not so much Manchurian Candidate as just a wake-up call to the simple fact that all politics is corrupt, and all politicians, no matter where you're arguing about it, no matter what country you're having the debate, most of your politicians are probably owned and operated, if not deeply influenced, or threatened and bullied by the same set of corporate war profiteers that own everything and profiteer on everything and, send us off to kill each other in the name of gold, oil, and drugs. Stay tuned for more analysis and more talk. I'm really looking forward to finding out more about this Tom Arnold thing. So that's another segment. I was going to do a whole breaking news segment about Tom Arnold, but we'll just stick that pin here at the end of this episode and be like, did you guys see Tom Arnold? Roseanne's ex-husband. On a personal note, poor bastard looks like he's done a good job of recovering from a massive drug addiction of some kind, because he looks like a former tweaker coke addict, meth head that's gotten really healthy, but still kind of, has a hard time processing. And I don't know I'm not accusing him of that. I'm just saying, wow, he looks stressed and edgy and amped up and fraught with a lot of thoughts all at once, and easily sort of distracted and spiraled out of control in his own thinking. But he's always been kind of manic and weird that way, hasn't he? And I have no idea if he was or ever has been the kind of person to explore or indulge in the harder, crazier, kookier drugs that make you like that. But holy cow, in the 3 different instances that I saw him on the news over the last 24 hours, did he lay down some cryptic, half-finished, half-started statements that cumulatively all add up to feeling like some really serious implications or pointings towards some big revelations, or a lot of really crackhead hype that's going to be a whole bunch of nothing. And the interesting part is that it's about a show that he's launching in September, where he's promising to reveal Donald Trump-related audio and videotapes, ranging the full spectrum from the ones we've already seen, like the grab him by the birth canal, which is my favorite way of replacing the curse word. Although I don't think pussy should be a bad word, right? I'm not afraid to say pussy on my own podcast. It obviously can be used pejoratively once you objectify a person to a pussy or whatever, or use it to, say slanderous or not slanderous, pejorative, degrading things, sure. But in general, the word is just another word, right? But from that tape to tapes that he claims, Tom Arnold does, claim that have never been brought to the mainstream media as of yet. And this whole weirdness of him hanging out with Michael Cohen, which, by the way, to kind of round out the whole breaking news and make it a trifecta episode, had a really interesting revelation that I almost missed yesterday, but was watching a recap of one of the many shows that I monitor, which I prefer not to reference half the time, mostly because I don't want anybody suing me. This is an opinion show about what's in the news, and if I had staff and a thing and a production crew, I'd be able to pay all the right fees, etc., so that I could reference and play clips, but I can't yet, so it's easier to just be kind of vaguely anonymous. But rewatching the show from yesterday, because I'd sort of gotten distracted and had gotten a couple phone calls in the middle of it and hadn't bothered to rewind and whatnot, because some days I forget that I'm watching it on a computer instead of directly from, some sort of analog system. But yesterday I completely missed, and it hit me pretty intensely today when I got to absorb it, that Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, is not only appearing to be in cahoots with Tom Arnold, but wrote an op-ed somewhere, or was quoted somewhere in an article, and it's been, kind of slightly reported here and there on the TV, that he openly slams Donald Trump for this border immigration child abduction crisis. Because, as it turns out, Michael Cohen is the descendant of immigrants who escaped persecution in Europe somewhere and had to flee here to the United States. And maybe, I'm not sure if they were just regular plain old immigrants that did it legally, but did it because things were kind of horrible, or needed to plead asylum and did, and did it in that asylum way. I doubt that Michael Cohen was claiming to be the descendant of illegal aliens, but he might be, right? If you think about it, the 13 colonies were all illegal from the point of view of the Native Americans. So once you draw that line, every immigrant since then has been an illegal immigrant, regardless. But that's, of course, a step too far for most people, because the Native American government is not the government in control. Let's put a pin on that. I want to find someone from a native tribe and have a conversation with them for a segment of Conversations With, and to represent Native American culture more, because I do tend to sort of discuss things from including some reference point there, because I think it's important for our perspective, as I was talking about in another episode recently, to always remember that this country is founded on a true invasion of another people's homeland. Even as our current president, a very orange-toned white man, claims that we are being invaded by filth, and describing this wave of immigration as an infestation, which is a disgusting and pejorative exaggeration to the point of being a lie, because immigration, and both legal and illegal, has been pretty balanced and fair, and et cetera, et cetera. All those facts and figures, of course, fall on deaf ears because they believe the great big Cheeto and his rhetoric. But I digress. It would be interesting to have a conversation with someone who would know, having deep roots themselves in Native American cultures, what would this country be like if the Native Americans had a little bit more sophisticated national, federal, organizational government system and had the upper hand on the Pilgrims and the subsequent wave of, dare I say, illegal immigrants from Europe. And instead of 13 colonies and the establishment of a bloody corporate invasion of this continent, there had been more of a holistic integration of peoples from everywhere under the leadership and guidance of the Aboriginal culture and thinking of the Native American peoples. Wouldn't that be an interesting episode? If anybody out there knows a genuine, full-blooded and well-versed Native American public speaker that would be open to the idea of, being a featured guest on my humble and tiny and very rough-shod podcast, hook me up. Let me know. Send me a link. Send us a mutual friend invite on Facebook or something like that. Because I think as we face all this oppression. I was thinking about this. I've had this thought before. Back, do you guys remember way back in the day when our Native American brothers and sisters protected us, defended us against the invasion of corporate oil pipelines that would have probably, that continues to this day. It's just no longer on the daily grind of the news media. But when those were the headlines, what was that, a year ago, 2 years ago? I had some thoughts along those lines, like, where is the vision of what America would be like if those who came here back in the Pilgrim and colony days had come here and respectfully integrated into the established pre-existing culture, instead of disrespectfully invaded like really greedy scum and killed everybody. and then, incarcerated the survivors. But I digress. So Cohen, given his heritage, openly slams President Trump, apparently just in the last 48 hours or so, maybe 72, in this op-ed or this article that he's quoted in. And wow, did that hit me strong, because from just a few weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago, I had been really pondering the question and trying to see if I could figure out which of the two Trump associates, Michael Cohen or what's his name, Bannon, was it Steve Bannon, which of the two of them would flip first, and of the two of them, which would be the scapegoat, or the blood sacrifice, the guy that goes down with the sinking ship. And it's quite clear now, with hindsight, if you stop and pause for a minute and really just look back, if you need to physically Google or YouTube the footage of Steve Bannon walking to his court appointments, being, accosted by, all the clips and footage that they show of him coming in and out of court, and when he was finally, he surrendered himself, right? He wasn't really arrested. He was incarcerated because he surrendered himself because he knew, he could see, right? He could see the impossible, and then he committed the crimes and all that. He committed the attempted witness tampering, which is something I wanted to do a whole episode about, and I never had the time. But looking at it now with hindsight, and this is just, it's funny, it feels like a long time ago. It's just a few days and or weeks ago that this happened to him. And if you look, reaching back to when he first, when the investigation first started to open up and include him, the look on his face on every minute of footage of him walking to and from all these locations and going into courtrooms and going into his self-surrendered incarceration, he's got this plastic, immobile, almost sociopathic grin of like, everything's fine, and I'm rich, I'm bazillionaire, and I'm doing what's got to get done. I don't know, I can't even put words to what that grin looks like. But this attempt at smiling, but also looking unapproachable, right? Because he's surrounded by media, and they're all asking him questions, and he's just like, nope, swatting them away, literally shoving reporters away. Stoic, right? Stoic the whole time. Going into jail, a stoic man with no... I haven't seen one moment yet. Maybe I missed it, because obviously I can't watch the news or monitor the print media 24 hours a day. But I try pretty hard to check in once or twice a day and see what's going on. And not just one channel, mind you guys. Whenever I check the news, for those of you who haven't caught on yet, I do the whole news roulette. And now with this new, by the way, in this breaking news episode, I get to announce the fun, random, real-life update. I've relocated, so hopefully the sound environment's going to be a little bit better, because I'm not going to be right on this boisterous noise avenue that I was before. A very noisy thoroughfare and railroad tracks previously, and also new cable service provider, which not endorsing. I'm not trying to drag that kind of nonsense in, but I have a whole new array of news channels, and in my previous cable provider, I had fewer news channels, and curiously, weirdly, fewer of the right-wing news channels. Now I've got the full spectrum, guys. So this is going to be interesting, and I just want to close the show with this, because I think I'm going to be on top of a lot more news stuff and be doing a lot more of these NBN segments. But I've got new news channels, some of which I'd never heard of before until just now, including, I think it's called I-24 News, which I'm increasingly coming to the suspicion it might be, if not directly, sort of indirectly, a kind of pro-Israel news channel. They haven't been overt yet, but they do, in the times that I've scanned through what their offerings are, there's been a lot more Middle East panel discussions in the past I've only been in this new location for a couple of weeks now, a little over a month, really. But so I haven't, and I have been sort of avoiding and on hiatus too. But I've just interesting trends I've noticed. So that channel, I've got Russia TV or Russia Today or whatever that channel was, which is mind-blowing that it's still on and that people have sort of forgotten, apparently, that they were part of the fake news distributors and part of the whole chain of events during the Russia influence campaign, starting as early, apparently, as 2016, if not arguably 2015. For some reason, when I was watching this most recent news thing about the ambassadors and the diplomats being discovered in strange locations that curiously coincided with some aspects of technology infrastructure in the United States, especially in remote locations, it occurred to me that I think we're about to get hit with some news that there's been sort of ignored but already previously reported evidences that Russia has been sort of turning up the heat on what was previously sort of put to bed Cold War spy tactics, going back as far as 2014. For some reason, I don't know why, this thought just came to me. The number, 2014, is going to be really important soon. I could be crazy. It visually came up to me in the middle of watching that segment. And those of you who know me well, I trust my instincts, and especially when I don't consider myself a person who receives visions, but sometimes I see weird things in my head. That's strange. I mean, I might edit that out. I might not. Might let it stand. So, digressing and trying to wrap things up. It's going to be interesting moving forward because I have all these new channels, like I was saying, and including a few more Fox channels. So I'm going to spend more time in this breaking news segment, not just commenting on or sharing with you some interesting news articles that you may not have caught in the recent news cycles, but also criticizing and analyzing the different platform techniques that they use. Because one of my theories is, of course, that it's overt, and this is sort of almost mainstreamly well known, and to the point that some news commentators on cable news have commented and critiqued their own industry. But only a small handful of corporations own all of the cable news outlets, and they're all really highly interrelated. And the ones that are truly in competition against each other focus quite overtly on echo chamber techniques as a means to, rally their base, to borrow language from the political sphere, and to differentiate themselves from their competition. So stay tuned, folks. As always, I humbly invite you to submit your comments, questions, suggestions, critiques. Just, try to keep the hate and the ideological rhetoric out of it, because as you may or may not realize, my primary effort is to help folks understand that ideology is a huge part of the problem. Or rather, ideology is a huge tool used by those who have created the actual problem. And so we cannot solve that problem with ideology. For more of my thoughts on ideology, tune into some of my other segments, including the forthcoming Stick With Me, My Thesis Gets Weirder Part 2, which is should be dropping soon. Thank you for tuning in. I am the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo.